Don't eat that. It will turn to sugar. This is one of the really interesting and strange claims that people make all the time. And the idea behind it is that eating lots of various foods, that they all turn into sugar in the bloodstream, and therefore you shouldn't eat them. But here's the problem with that logic. Our bodies convert tons of foods into blood sugar, glucose, because we need it for survival. It is, in fact, our primary and preferred fuel source. Now, where this creates confusion is because people with diabetes can't regulate their blood glucose very well, so therefore, knowing these things can be a problem. They have to adjust their medications, and it's problematic for them, but it doesn't mean that the glucose itself is bad. It means that they have a specific medical issue that requires some accommodations for this. And the thing to keep in mind with that, type 2 diabetics, if they can lose the weight and get their insulin sensitivity back under control, even then the glucose is not a problem. But we need to be very, very, very clear here. For people who are not diabetic, foods turning into glucose is not a negative. It's not a concern. In fact, it's a good thing. Again, our body does it because this is what it prefers to burn for fuel. Okay? We need to be very clear on that. And it does not cause diabetes. In other words, the things that are associated with creating type 2 diabetes, type 1 you're born with. Okay, that's genetic. That's not your lifestyle. So in that case, you wouldn't even be concerned with your diet causing it. You were born with it. Type 2 is lifestyle induced. Now, up at the top of the list, obesity. Having too much body fat, excessive adiposity, is the primary cause. Then you have to look at what foods negatively impact insulin sensitivity, and the top of the list is saturated fat, and then fructose behind it. Now, keep in mind, I didn't say that in small amounts either one of these are a concern. They're not. Okay, so are we clear there? It's excess. Excess. Now, people will say, okay, well, that's true, but too much of anything is bad. So we shouldn't be worried about these foods at all. Well, no, it's that it's easy for us to reach excess with these foods, right? We have access to enough fatty meat, fatty foods, all these different things that we can easily get excessive saturated fat. We have access to enough refined sugars that we can get excess fructose that reaches the liver. Okay, it's easy for us to do in our modern food environment, and that's the problem. It's not only easy to do, it is common. Now, of course, these things are also then correlated with obesity, which again, a massive driver of type 2 diabetes. All right, these are the concerns. But here's the thing that's interesting to note. Notice that the two foods I listed, at no point early in entering the bloodstream do they get converted into glucose. I think that's a bit telling, isn't it? Yeah? Right? Saturated fat is saturated fat. It's just not a carbohydrate. When it reaches the liver, it creates insulin resistance in the liver. It creates fatty liver. Right? It contributes to it. Fructose that has not been converted into glucose is a problem. Okay? And we need to be clear there. Our body has multiple pathways to turn fructose. Again, that's 50% of table sugar is fructose. 55% of high fructose corn syrup is also really heavy in fruit, hence the original term fructose. But our gut can convert a significant amount of it, again, assuming whole foods like fruits, converts it into glucose, in which case it doesn't create insulin resistance. All right, our bloodstream can convert a little bit. We have enzymes in our bloodstream that can convert it to glucose. So when fructose is converted to glucose by anything but the liver, it's a good thing. It doesn't contribute to these problems. It's when it reaches the liver, and your liver has to do it through the same process that it converts alcohol. This is a problem. So these two foods reaching the liver, reaching your internal organs, contribute to this. The sugar itself, as in the glucose, doesn't create these problems, right? It's not even associated with these. It's not even a factor. then of course obesity. But these other two things tend to be linked to obesity because insulin resistance and of course saturated fat restores body fat quite easily, right? More readily than anything else you can eat. Not saying other stuff can't be, but efficiently it is the most efficient calorie source for creating body fat in humans, right? Hopefully people understand that. Other fats can be just that saturated fat's a little better at turning into fat by a small margin, okay? And then any of these that create insulin resistance tend to make us lethargic and hungry, right? So obesity is the issue. Insulin resistance is the issue. But blood sugar itself is not the issue. The elevated blood sugar is a side effect because we're not processing it properly. We're not utilizing it properly. And that's a bad thing. That's really the problem because we should be using it properly. Again, we need to be clear. It is the primary fuel source of the human body, and it is technically the preferred fuel source of every cell in your body. And there are some cells in your body that absolutely have to have it. It's not just preferred, it is essential for those cells to survive. Okay? So everyone has this idea that, oh, well, but it's a bad thing because of diabetes. But that is literally only if you are a diabetic, and type 1 is managed with medication, and type 2 can be largely reversed with lifestyle intervention. Okay? So we need to be clear here. For everybody else in the world, glucose is great. Glucose is amazing. A glucose-based diet is promoted. It promotes longevity. It promotes athleticism. It promotes better body composition. Right? Again, this is what the data shows. This is not a problem. And so we shouldn't be looking at foods and going, oh, your body will convert this into glucose and seeing it as a bad thing. In fact, anyone who's claiming that it is doesn't understand human metabolism at all. Like they do not have even a rudimentary knowledge of human metabolism. They're too caught up in the diabetes paradigm. And again, I understand if you're a type 1, absolutely, but that's a tiny number of people. I have a personal friend who's a type 1. But again, that's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of people. It's like less than 1% of people. Type 2 is lifestyle induced. Fix your diabetes. Instead of worrying about glucose, fix your diabetes. Lose weight, exercise, eat more fiber, reduce saturated fat, reduce refined sugar. Okay, there you go. There's your solution. That way you reduce that fructose. You reduce the saturated fat, and we slow down absorption of everything. There's your solution. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.